Okay. Well, yeah. So we're going to review this past month in astronomy. And yeah, actually, some of it was mentioned in this nice talk. So thank you again, Professor Kramer. Um, yeah, so let's go right to the news that we've had this month. So first, I think this was a couple days after our last event. They finally powered on Ingenuity in flight. This is still in flight. You know that NASA sent Perseverance and Ingenuity to Mars. So Perseverance um, is the rover that's actually cut off by the slide here, and then Ingenuity is this helicopter that they will power remotely, and they powered it on for the first time. It's due to arrive in Mars in February, I think, next year. But they have to power it on and make sure that everything is working in flight. So it has 6 batteries that they have to keep charged at 35%. They found that keeping a lower charge for the journey is the most beneficial. You would get the optimal battery power at the end. And then when they get to Mars on the full charge with these 6 batteries, they hope to last 30 Martian days, which is 31 Earth days because Mars rotates slower than Earth. But yeah, so they powered it on, and then they found that everything's working properly. So that's good to hear. Although it's kind of just starting its travel to Mars. So we'll see how this progresses over the months. And then, yeah, this was fairly interesting. They have an image of Mars in ultraviolet light. They call it a night glow. So what happens is that when Mars is facing the sun, or the side that is facing the sun kind of takes all of the carbon dioxide and nitrogen in the air, and it disassociates this and breaks it down to the elements. And then these elements through the atmosphere kind of migrate back over to the night side of Mars. So this dawn-dusk line, as we would call it, or the horizon. And then once it gets to the night side and it's not bombarded with all the light from the sun, then it starts to recombine, and then you get, yeah, it just looks like a word in capital letters, but it's nitrogen oxide, NO. And then the formation of this produces the ultraviolet light. So they call this a night glow that they've seen on Mars. And it's just a fairly interesting picture. This, I think, is an artist's representation of it because you wouldn't get a high resolution image like this.
Yeah, but still it is a very interesting picture.
Yeah, I quite like it. And then, yeah, so what Professor Kramer mentioned, so this happened this month, which everybody's quite sad about it. Our SIBO was damaged. So what happened was one of the support cables fell down and damaged the surface. Here you can see another image of it. So this hole that you're seeing here looks terrible, but it's only a small portion just by the bowl here. Actually, it's probably on this side, because what happened is that one of these cables that are supporting this walkway snapped and then fell down. And these are very, very heavy cables. And they have to be very heavy because that's a lot of weight that they're supporting. But one of these fell down and damaged the surface. So it's not operational at the moment, which is very sad. And this walkway is now crooked and twisted because one of the support cables fell off. So now they can't even do observations. They can't do anything. They have to fix the walkway first and then go to the centerpiece and make sure that that is working correctly before they can take an observation. Luckily, this happened when nobody was taking an observation, so nobody was injured. That is the main good news. Yeah, and so now everybody's going to be rushing to try and make sure that this is working correctly. But it's sad. It's a very old observatory and very important for astronomers. but yeah, they're still investigating the main cause of this. I don't think they've gotten anywhere with it yet. But yeah, we'll see how that progresses. Yeah, so this one might be, if you read a headline like this, it might be a bit concerning. But this isn't a major air leak. I mean, any air leak, I guess, would be major for an International Space Station. But this isn't so bad that it poses a threat to the astronauts on the International Space Station right now. They first observed this leak in September last year, so like a year ago. And then they wanted to, it's gotten progressively worse, and they wanted to kind of vacate the International Space Station, or at least the American side of it, and make sure that, or try to isolate where this leak is coming from. So the astronauts that are on the International Space Station right now, one from NASA and two from Russia, they went to the Russian side of the International Space Station for a weekend, I think. And then NASA engineers could lock some of the modules and try to isolate where the air leak was coming from. But from what I heard, or at least the last news piece I read, they had no luck with that. So they still couldn't find it. But luckily, I mean, a small air leak is not too much of a big deal because they have enough nitrogen tanks, and then they can keep the cabin pressurized. So it's just that they're using up more nitrogen than they would like. But I don't think this is an immediate threat yet. But yeah, we'll see how it goes in the next year.
Yeah.
And this one, yeah, I wanted to talk about this one because this is not word for word from the press release, but this is pretty much the gist of the press release: alien technology in our solar system. So be careful when you're reading a press release. So when astronomers have a result or some paper that they quite like and they think that the public would be interested, they do a press release. And when you do a press release, you have to make it catchy. You have to make it so that the public will read it. And an easy way to do this is to talk about aliens. But this can be a bit concerning. This is not really what the press release or the result was about. They're not researching alien technology in our solar system. They're just thinking of the possible causes of this orbit, or at least the trajectory of this object. So in 2018, they discovered an interstellar object, so not from our own solar system, that came into our solar system. And they called this, it had this long cigar shape from this artist's rendition here. And they called it Oumuamua. I think I'm mispronouncing it, but it's a Hawaiian name. I think it means heavenly body. I forgot. But yeah, so this object is still in our solar system. And what astronomers are observing is that it is actually accelerating, and not accelerating in a way that they would be able to reason. So some people are explaining it by the same effects that cause a comet to change its orbit so rapidly, where the sun heats up some of the ice and converts some of the frozen hydrogen on the surface to convert to hydrogen gas. And then the astronomers are saying that you just can't see this gas right now, and that's what's causing this big object to accelerate. But some other research has been done saying that there's no formation, no way for this to form, and basically, and not have the ice, or it won't have ice on the surface that is hydrogen, and not have ice that would be able to be sublimated and converted into gas so quickly. So this was an offhand remark from the press release that there's some alien technology that's accelerating it, but nowhere in any of the papers published is that an explanation. But this issue is still being debated. I think there's 2 teams of astronomers that are researching this heavily right now. I think this was only a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, there's an old satellite for geophysics, the orbiting geophysics observatory. It was one of 4 observatories that were sent in orbit in 1964, 1965 to research the magnetic environment around Earth. These were retired in the 70s, but they were still orbiting. They were designed like many other orbital satellites around Earth, that they would burn up on re-entry to Earth. So that happened, and that's fine, because you don't want some impact crater from a satellite falling to Earth. So in the news, you might be hearing that they're launching a bunch of Starlink satellites and other satellites, but mainly there's a multitude of Starlink satellites, but all of these are fairly large, but they're designed so that they burn up in the atmosphere if they were to fall back, if they were to retire and then fall back to Earth. So these don't pose a threat to people living on Earth. But yeah, I think this entered the atmosphere just south of Tahiti and then burnt up in the atmosphere over the southern Pacific Ocean. Yeah, and then Kepler is still being analyzed. So the Kepler satellite, which you see here, has spent 9 years in space, or 9 years of dedicated observations. It had its own issues with its K1 and K2 missions, but it has a multitude of data. It had 2 modes. So there was a short cadence mode and a long cadence mode. The short cadence mode was just for 200,000 pre-confirmed satellites or pre-confirmed stars that they would observe every 2 minutes. And then the long cadence mode, which is for the rest of the Kepler fields that you see here, were an observation every 30 minutes. But this retired in 2018, but there's still a large amount of data for us to go to. So it automatically flags potential exoplanet host stars, and then that has to be confirmed by astronomers later. But what a team in Warwick has done is designed the first AI program to automatically confirm these exoplanets. And it has confirmed 50 exoplanets so far. But they're hoping that this will be very useful for, now there's TESS, which is the successor to Kepler. And right now there's a big issue in astronomy that you're having so much more data that's being produced than in previous decades. So there's an issue on how much time do we have to go through all this data. And so AI is one of the solutions that we pick. So yeah, this just kind of proves the success of AI, at least in exoplanet research for all the planet hunters. All right, so in the night sky is a review of what you could see this past month and also what you will be able to see this coming month. This coming month, I couldn't find too many things, so it's mainly going to be about this past month. This is something that I heard about recently, like a few weeks ago. Somebody asked me about this and I had no idea what it was, but apparently this is a hoax that exists. So it started in 2003. In 2003, August 27th, 2003, Mars and Earth were closer than they've ever been for over 57,000 years. This is confirmed through programs, of course. Nobody was recording data 57,000 years ago. But the fallacy was in 2003, there was an email that went around saying that Mars is going to be the same size as the moon in the night sky, which is really false. Mars is twice the size of the moon, I think, about. But it's like, yeah, maybe 200 times as far away as the moon. So even if you had a conjunction event where the moon and Mars could be visible at that time, you would still need, Mars would have to be 71 times as big as the moon, which is not true. So even if you have a conjunction event at this periastron, then Mars will be quite small, and you would still need an amateur telescope to even make out any details of the surface. But this fallacy kind of keeps recurring every 2 years because Mars and the Earth are on a 2-to-1 orbital period relation. So every 2 years, Mars and the Earth kind of get close to each other again at this periastron where their orbits are closed. It's 7 years ago, so I think this was just a throwaway piece for this press article, but it's something to be aware about, that this exists, and don't believe any of the articles telling you that Mars is going to be as big as the moon, because that won't happen. This happened this week, actually. This asteroid came close to Earth. The orbit is still not known because they can't observe it long enough, or they couldn't when they first observed it in 2011. But I think this was just on Monday or Tuesday. This asteroid passed within the lunar orbit, actually, so very close to Earth, and it is about the size of a jumbo jet is the analogy that I read. So it's not that big, but it's not like a meteor or anything. Like in 2013, there was a Chelyabinsk meteor that actually entered the atmosphere above Russia, and it was so large that it created a shock wave in the atmosphere, and it damaged some of the windows beneath. But this is not a meteor. It did not enter the Earth's atmosphere. This just kind of passed through the lunar orbit. This was a near miss, but maybe you would have been able to see it. I couldn't find any images online except for this artist's rendition. But as for this coming month, the main event that I could find is that Neptune is in opposition. So on the 11th of September, it's the best time to get an image of Neptune. So Neptune in opposition would mean that Neptune is on the opposite side of the Earth than the Sun. So its entire disk will be illuminated and you can see it. You would still need a fairly nice telescope to see it because it is not visible with the naked eye. But if you're into astrophotography and you have a nice telescope, then you should take a picture of Neptune and send it to us because we'd love to see it. But yeah, that pretty much concludes this session. I will post the references later, but we would like to announce our next event, which will be on October 1st with Professor Frank Verbund. He will talk about astronomy and astrology in history, or kind of how the two are related and how the two differ. And for that, you kind of have to look at how they both started and how they were the same, and then they deviated, one in a scientific direction and one in a different. But yeah, should be a nice presentation. We will post an official announcement, I guess, tomorrow. But yeah, Thank you. Happy observing.
Oh, yeah. So thank you for all who all joined us to do online YouTube live events, and we will see you in the next week. So clear skies.
Clear skies. Goodbye.